Yeah, so our speaker today, we're very pleased to have Professor Ron Barkai from Tel Aviv University. He is a Paleolithic archaeologist that has a primary specialization in stone tools, what we like to call lithic technology, but really has addressed a wide range of different topics in human evolution and the Paleolithic, spanning all different kinds of aspects of human evolution. Including one that we're going to hear about today, I believe, which is the role of human-elephant interactions in human evolution and the way in which ancient ontologies and cosmologies may be manifest in the archaeological record. So Ron has spent his entire career at Tel Aviv University from the BA up till today and has run for the past 20 or so years excavations at the famous Lower Paleolithic site of Kesem Cave. And this has led to many insights into changing diet, social organization, and technology at this critical later Paleolithic, early Middle Paleolithic period of human evolution. His research output I can only describe as incredibly prolific. I started going over his CV and counting publications. I think I lost track somewhere around 100. And rather than starting it, I figured, well, it's just a lot. And probably anyway, by the time I finished counting, he would have had another one and I would be out of date. So very impressive. And we look forward to hearing his talk today about the elephant in the Handaxe, Lower Paleolithic ontologies and representations. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Ron Barkai.
Well, shalom. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Ditz, for the introduction and for hosting me. I'll be talking a bit mostly about my thoughts following, as Ditz says, 2.5 decades of doing fieldwork and lithic technology. It will be mostly thinking out loud. It will be following my own ontological journey that I will describe a bit. And I'm afraid it will be interpretative, speculative, and controversial. I mean, this is the way I see things now, and you are really welcome to discuss, to argue, to disagree, but you better think about that. Some of the thoughts were published, some are in the process of being hopefully published, and some, I guess, will never be published, but this is the way I see things now. The core of my talk was published last year in Cambridge Archaeological Journal in this quote here below, but from then I kept on thinking, so there are new aspects in the presentation. Just to introduce my view on the ontological turn. I know the ontological turn is a big thing, so I'll explain what I find in it and why I find it interesting. So what I find interesting in the ontological turn is a departure from the anthropocentric perspectives, meaning it is not only all about humans, an adoption of a cosmocentric perspective, the departure from the nature-culture divide, an emphasis on relational epistemology. I will talk about this a bit later, about taking seriously indigenous worldviews and understanding that indigenous hunter-gatherers view the world differently than do weird societies, which is us, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. How I came about to experience this ontological turn. As Ditz described, I've been working for the last 20 years, excavating the site of Kesem Cave. It's a Middle Pleistocene site in Israel. I won't get into all the details, but it is placed at a significant point in human cultural and biological evolution and is of major significance. A lot of transformations took place during this time, and we were trying to figure out what was the reason for these transformations. It took us a lot of time. We analyzed most of the finds and so on. And we realized that one of the core elements that we see that distinguish between the Lower Paleolithic Acheulean and what is called in the Levant, the Acheulo-Hebridean cultural complex, which is the time of Kesem Cave, is mostly the fact that elephants were not around after 400,000 years ago in the Levant. elephants were around most probably during the prior 1 million years, during the whole time of the Lower Paleolithic Acheulean, but they were missing from the Levant starting 400,000 years ago. And this is the time in the early 2000s that we realized that elephants might have had a central role in human cultural and biological evolution. And at this point, I started getting into studying human elephants relationships and interactions. Following that, the second part has to do with handaxes and bifaces. I will talk today about two of my favorite aspects, which are elephant and handaxes. And the study of handaxes led me to the particular phenomenon of handaxes made of elephant bones, which is not well known enough, but exists in many, many places. You see here to your left, a magnificent replica of an Acheulean handaxe, which is made on elephant limb bone from a site in Italy. And then I got to read this marvelous book that you see here, which is called Bringing Home Animals, which is one of the significant books in anthropology that describe human-animal interactions. And then luckily, I got to meet the author, Adrian Tanner, in a conference in Cambridge. And we spent few days talking obsessively about hunting and animals and so on. And he was kind enough to invite me to visit him in Newfoundland. And we went to Labrador to meet the Cree groups that he was working with. And we spent some time with the Cree in Labrador, which was really, really instrumental to me. And I managed even to grab my eldest daughter before she joined the army with me. She's sitting here with a red shirt inside the tent of this elderly woman of the Cree. And this was really, it was not a revelation, but it brought to a really deep understanding of the relationship of the Cree with animals and indigenous people in general with animals. And this is the time I got really deep into ontology and cosmology. So in Paleolithic archaeology, we usually set apart what we call utilitarian or practical and non-utilitarian or functional or spiritual, social. I would like to put all the elements together here today and try to convince you that we should put it in one perspective, just to make the terms right, just so you understand what I mean and what I talk about. When I say ontology, I mean mostly a theory about the world, a kind of understanding of the nature and relation of being, the way the world is perceived by humans, and the way humans perceive their place in the world. And indeed, I believe that it existed already in the Lower Paleolithic. When I say cosmology, I mean, and other people mean a different thing. It's an order or world of order, a set of knowledge, beliefs, interpretations, and practices of a society or culture related to explanation about the origin and evolution of the universe, etc., etc. And you get what I mean. For example, we are very well familiar with the cosmology of the Inca and the Maya and other indigenous groups. And what is common to the cosmology of many indigenous groups is that the world is divided to three parts. There is the upper world, the middle world, and the lower world. And in many cases, animals are the agents that combine the worlds, just to keep in mind. The evolution of this kind of thinking in anthropology and in archaeology, believe, started with animism, with spirits of concept with the concept of animal spirits and so on. It developed what is called in these studies new animism, which has to do not with spirits but what is termed other than human persons. And in the last 2 decades, it developed into what is usually called perspectivism or ontological perspectives, following the works of many scholars. Why it is not moving now? Maybe this, sorry. Yeah, here these are just a combination of books of different scholars like Philippe de Scola, Eduardo Viveros de Castro, and others who put together all kinds of perspectives, ontological perspectives about human indigenous groups' relations with the cosmos. So just if you want to get a brief read of these items, it will lead you to the place we are now. So at least in my understanding, indigenous groups, past and present, had a kind of a creation myth, had a kind of a belief how the world was formed, how it works, and how it should continue to work in order to keep human well-being. Just to summarize this part, again, it appears in many papers, and just to summarize how I see things, I believe that the current anthropological and archaeological thinking leads to a place in which past and present hunter-gatherers were not just exploiting what we call natural resources. Indigenous societies view the world in a unique way, as composed of other than human persons capable of thinking, feeling, deciding, etc. In such complex situation, multiple worlds exist in parallel: a world of humans, a world of animals, a world of stones, a world of mountains, a world of rivers, and so on. The human world is just one of many, and humans must live side by the other entities and pay them respect in order to ensure world order. The key word is respect, and we'll get back to it later. And again, I believe there are archaeological evidence that show that such perception existed already in the earlier part of the history of the human race. In general, human behavior is considered to be dictated by all kinds of elements like the availability of resources, climate and the environment, all kinds of technological abilities, and so on and so forth. And we usually try to explain human behavior by applying all kinds of methods like human behavioral ecology, optimal foraging theory, niche construction theory, and so on. But in many cases, we should keep in mind that, again, this is all about humans and nothing but humans. In many cases, these approaches fail to explain human behavior in the past. And thus, I believe that a more cosmocentric approach might be helpful. We should also keep in mind that humans are not rational. Humans are motivated by multiple factors, mostly by some sort of belief. People have a theory about the world and the way it operates. So why do we expect early humans to be only rational? Why do we examine past human behavior only in terms of efficiency, survival, or other rational criteria? When we come across evidence for non-rational or non-practical behavior, we call it sacred, symbolic, or ritual, and we don't bother to explain this term usually. We assume that in these cases, other considerations than rationale guided human behavior. Why assume such consideration acted only in extraordinary cases and not on a daily basis? I'll give you two examples. This is a guy named Clive Freeman. He's an Aboriginal Australian. I met him in the conference in Turin in Italy in 2018 about Neanderthal art. And he presented a marvelous work about beads, about seashell beads, necklaces that are made and used by Australian Aborigines. In common archaeological interpretation, we would describe these as body decorations or personal identity items or items related to group identity or to status or gender. In the case of this Aboriginal group in New South Wales, these shell bead necklaces are related only to one thing, which are fish. These shells are brought to the shore just before these huge fish are coming, and the Aboriginal are dependent on these fish in order to make a living. So they use these necklaces in order to allow the fish to arrive, and it is related to the season of the arrival of the fish. Another example, this is one that I imagined, is an archaeological excavation. This is an actual stone from Kesem Cave that we found. A stone was found at archaeological site, and it was found by a couple, by a Western archaeologist and an indigenous archaeologist. The Western archaeologist will ask what it is and will perform a whole kind of test. Is it an artifact? Was it shaped? Any user, any evidence of function? Well, it is just a stone. The indigenous archaeologist will ask, is it alive? And we'll try to see if this stone is a non-human person, and it might be the most important item at the site, just as a matter of example. I like very much the writings of Robin Val Kimmerer, which is native herself, and she's doing mostly studies about ancient ecological knowledge and the study of plants. She writes beautifully, and I highly recommend you to read what she writes. I'll just read one quote from her 2018 paper, just to summarize this part. A landscape of streams and lakes, mountains and rich valleys, shared by thousands of species of plant and animals, is understood through the lens of Western materialistic worldview as a wealth of ecosystem services or natural resources. In contrast, through the lens of traditional indigenous philosophy, the living world is understood not as a collection of exploitable resources, but as a set of relationships and responsibilities. And now we get to the Paleolithic, but before we do that, I need to share with you some of the basic and personal premises that leads me in research. And again, there are a lot of disagreements about these aspects, and I present you my view. So first, Paleolithic people, starting 2 million years ago, experienced high energetic demands in terms of caloric intake. They needed thousands of calories a day to make a living. The Paleolithic diet was based, in my opinion, on the consumption of fat and protein, supplemented by vegetable food. They ate whatever was available. Animals were plentifully available, and the diet was based on fat and meat, but they also ate, of course, vegetable material. What is very important to point out is that humans are limited by their physical ability to extract calories from protein. This is well published, but not very well taken into account. It is accepted by all that humans are able to extract only 1/3 of the calorie needed on average on a daily basis from protein, and the rest of the calories needs to come from someplace else. Natural vegetable foods, especially without the use of fire and before the advent of agriculture, is unlikely to be sufficient for the daily caloric intake. Fat can be consumed unlimitedly. Fat is the densest energy source in nature. It provides 9 calories per gram at a minimal digestion cost. Fat is digested to the extent of 95% or better. It is a carrier of all kinds of vitamins and so on, and some even say it is palatable. Herbivores, and especially elephants, provide a unique combination of fat and meat, as well as extraordinary fat quantities and qualities. Throughout the Paleolithic period, elephants and mammoth remains are found at many archaeological sites in the Old and New World. It is evident that early humans consumed Proboscideans, fat and meat, for hundreds of thousands of years. I claim that they were also capable of hunting these mega herbivores, and we can talk about this later, and we published about that. But elephants and mammoth played not only a nutritional role in the Paleolithic, but in my understanding, constituted a major cosmological and ontological elements. And we'll get to that soon. So the key words are fat and respect. In my opinion, fat, there was a craving for fat, and there was a need or an exception of the fact that animal prey should be treated with respect. I believe this is a universal aspect that has to do with all kinds of animals, not only with elephants, but also with whales and bears and caribou and eland and seal and beaver and whatsoever animal people were dependent upon. And these are 2 marvelous books which are really worth reading that give a perspective about how fat and respect are significant in indigenous societies, one in the case of the caribou and one in the case of whales. And I think, in my opinion, that elephants fall under this rubric as well. So early humans were sharing the landscape and the habitat with all sorts of animals, including elephants, and they were eating and hunting all sorts of animals, not only elephants, but also elephants, in my opinion. So it's not only elephants, but elephants for at least 1 million years, in my opinion, constitute the major dietary source of humans. And there are many, many archaeological evidence for elephant remains in archaeological sites. In some cases, bear cut marks, in others don't. but there are many evidence of this kind. And again, elephants and mammoths are significant because they are an important source of calories, and they are the largest terrestrial animal. They weigh 50, 80, 100, 200 times more than a deer. Elephants and mammoths have extra high caloric fat content. Half of the calorie within an elephant is in the fat. The other half is in the protein, but half is in the fat. Elephants remain high retention of body fat throughout the year. Unlike other animals, they don't lose fat in the lean season. They contain the same amount of fat. So even in the dry season, if you are able to hunt an elephant, you can be sure that it still had large quantities of fat, and elephants were available throughout the old world for over 1 million years. So the question, in my opinion, is not why elephants, but why not? Go on. This is again a paper that I like, and I put here just in order to show you that I'm not the only one that thinks like that. It's a paper from 2018, and there are other papers by the same group, by the same Spanish group. This paper is called Mammoth Resources for Hominins, and I'll just read the but you are welcome to read it all. A medium-sized mammoth would have stored 1 million kilocalories as fat, providing clear energy for hunting groups of 12 to 24 individuals for approximately 9 to 18 days. Again, 12 to 24 individuals for 9 to 18 days, while the consumption of variable amounts of meat, because as I explained before, they were not able to consume a lot of meat, would have extended this figure for some days. So a mammoth or a single elephant could provide a hunting gathering group for a lot of time. And sometimes it is better to see than talk. So we'll see a very short clip from a long video presenting pygmies from the Congo Basin in Central Africa butchering an elephant. Those of you who feel that they would not like to watch it are welcome to look aside or shut the screen. But I believe that it is really significant to see this short video in order to realize again the amount of fat and meat that a single elephant can provide.
Is serious business. But cutting up a full-grown bull elephant is serious business. By the next day, everybody with even the remotest claim to the meat has found their way to the carcass. The crowd includes those villagers who provided the spears and who claim to own Sangu and his hunter friends, and for that matter, their families too. But at a time like this, the villagers forget their pride. For the most part, the women keep out of the bloody struggle. They serve the purpose of guarding the ever-growing piles of meat thrown to them by their husbands. Before the tons of meat can be carried away, it must be smoke-dried to preserve it and to lighten its weight for the journey. Fires and meat racks are easily made from an abundance of wood. It takes about a day or two to smoke-dry the meat, and when it's ready, it may not look particularly appetizing, but it has lost more than half its weight. Nothing is wasted, not even the bone marrow. Using an axe provided by the villagers, a pygmy breaks open a huge leg bone of the elephant. Inside, the marrow is soft, raw, and ready to eat. It is also apparently delicious. The word spreads, and soon pieces of raw marrow are being eaten like candies.
Okay, we stop here. I think you understood. You got the message. Now, getting to the archaeological evidence, at many sites in Israel, in the old world, even other places, there is some kind of correlation between handaxes, bifaces, and elephant remains. This is an example from the site of Geshem Not Yaakov, a well-known site in Israel dated to around 800,000 years before present. The site was occupied repeatedly, and every human occupation at the site has elephant remains and bifaces. And this is a very special context, which are remains of a skull of an elephant with a wood bar that was used in order to manipulate the skull. And all around are broken parts of the elephant skulls and bifaces. This is another case from a site in Israel. The site is called Vadim Quarry. It's about 500,000 years before present. And here, for example, there is a specific context with an elephant rib bone that bear cut marks and a biface, a Handaxe, that residue analysis indicated that it had fat remains on the cutting edge. We don't know fat of which animal, and we're not sure that this connection with the elephant rib necessarily showed that it was used, that the Handaxe was used in cutting this elephant rib, but it might be indeed the case. So in my view, again, my personal view and my understanding, I see the available functional, technological, and experimental evidence, which is not enough, but what we have at hand, suggests the primary use of Paleolithic bifaces in processing animal carcasses. In some cases, indeed, Handaxes were used in other tasks than solely assisting the extraction of calories from different game taxa. The efficiency and suitability of Handaxes in cutting, defleshing, and dismembering carcasses, and in particular carcasses of large game taxa, was repeatedly suggested. Handaxes were efficient tools in processing large carcasses, enabling the removal of large quantities of fat and meat and the separation of body parts in order to be manipulated and transported. The Handaxe allows the application of considerable force and leverage during cutting and dismembering, and its continuous and mostly curved and sharp working edge is ideal for massive and intensive meat and fat processing tasks. Bifaces could be resharpened in order to prolong the use of the tool for continuous operations, such as processing of very large game. So I basically see Paleolithic Handaxes as mostly used in butchery large game. And again, we can discuss this and debate this later. But the toolkit of Paleolithic humans was composed, as you well know, not only of Handaxes and bifaces. They had other tools, and we had several studies from the site of Vadim showing that even the very small flint tools were used in cutting in a very precise way and assisted in the butchery. So they were using all set of tools, including large Handaxes, small, very sharp flakes, and of course scrapers in all kinds of tasks. So it was a whole toolkit, but the Handaxes, in my opinion, were mostly related to the processing of large game. So now we get to talk a little bit about this crazy phenomenon of replicas of the stone bifaces, which were made of elephant limb bones. And this is really, really, really exciting, and the material is beautiful. You should see it. Most of it is in Italy or in Europe, but there are some examples from Israel and Africa as well. It is important to note that bone bifaces were manufactured mostly from elephant bones. There is one example from a hippo bone, but all the rest are from elephant bones, while they were hunting and processing other animals, and animal bones of different tasks from different taxa are present at these sites. Bone bifaces were present only at sites where stone bifaces are present as well. It is never the case where bone bifaces are found without stone bifaces, so they go together. And the hypothesis that this was done because of a shortage in lithic raw material cannot be accepted, because all the sites present both stone bifaces and plentiful of stone available for making tools. This is a case presented in 2020 from Conso, Africa. It is 1.4 million years old, and it's a replica of bifaces made of a hippo bone. And this replica shows evidence of use. It was used in cutting alongside stone cutting tools, And we had a small debate on the pages of PNAS, the authors and myself, that you are welcome to read. So this is a welcome addition to the collection. So now I go back to the Innu, to the Cree, the ones in Labrador, and the marvelous book of Adrian Tanner, and I'll try to put the strings together in a way, in my way. And again, you are willing to think otherwise. About hunting and respecting, Adrian Tanner writes, a central attribute of the conduct of hunting is that game animals are persons and they must be respected. The rules of respect after the killing involve essentially taking care of all elements of the carcass and not allowing anything to be thoughtlessly discarded. Thus, blood and intestines are consumed, buried in the snow, or fed to the dogs. Bones are made into tools, hung in trees, put in bone platforms, or put in a lake, and all uneaten meat is fed to the dogs or put in the fire. But more significantly, the more commonly held belief is that the inedible remains continue to be part of the species as a whole, and their proper treatment in a way of avoiding giving offense to the master of the animal in question, thus enabling hunting to continue. Indeed, this is the perception of the Cree Innu of Labrador, but again, I believe it could be perceived as a kind of a universal perception of indigenous societies who are dependent on specific species of animals. And again, you are welcome to disagree. So I see the replicas of stone handexes made of elephant bones to show a cosmological circle in which a replica of the stone butchery tool is made from the bone of the butchered elephant. And this is the data we have at hand. I mean, this is the case. They were breaking up elephant limb bones, as you see in the picture to the left, and making replicas of the stone bifaces from the butchered elephant limb bones. In my opinion, and following my understanding, the intimate physical contact between the hunters and the item made from the hunted animal provides humans with a perspective of the animal. Butchered elephant bones were purposely selected in order to allow early humans to become elephants, to transform into elephants and experience the elephant's perspective and abilities. The elephant bone handexes might also have constitute a token of appreciation and respect toward the elephants, aimed at maintaining the special relationships and the continuous presence of elephants that enabled human existence and well-being, in my opinion, of course. Well, people and elephants have a long history and a very specific set of relationships. It comes with the reason that we give our children small elephants to sleep with and so on. It is well understood that human and elephants share a lot of similarities, both physiological similarities, behavioral and social similarities, and cognitive conceptual similarities. This is all well published in many cases, and I won't go into details, but it at least in my mind, it goes quite clearly that these similarities did not went unnoticed by early humans, and early humans as well viewed elephants as persons. And indeed, in many indigenous societies that still have interactions with elephants, elephants are viewed as persons, and groups that still hunt elephants in order to make a living, not for the ivory, execute a very complicated set of ritual plays and ceremonies prior to the hunting of the elephant. And this is again well documented, and you are welcome to read the papers by Jerome Lewis from UCL, who works at the Congo Basin with the pygmies who still hunt elephants, and he described this beautifully. I mean, poor elephant, I agree, but human had to make a living, and they done this way. Thinking back about the Handaxe, you know that the Handaxe has served early humans for a period of over 1 million years, and we were struggling with the question about Handaxe technological persistency. We claim that the appearance stagnation or studies or conservation or uniformity of the Handaxe, while innovation occurred in other fields is not because of lack of innovative capacity, as was described before, but due to a well-grounded functional need, the processing of large herbivores, which gave human hunting societies an energetic security, and in time, through psychological conformity and cultural conservatism, the Handaxe became a social norm, and we compare the Handaxe to the chopsticks. In many cases, you know, chopsticks are significant functional and cultural tools, and there are chopsticks made of all kinds of precious materials, which has precious significance and so on. So we just use this as a kind of recent analogy. So my hypothesis basically is that, as you understood, share the world with large herbivores, were dependent on fat and meat for their successful adaptation and well-being, and had special relationships with the animals they were dependent upon. Lower Paleolithic Handexes thus, in my mind, acted on both the practical and cosmological and ontological spheres. As long as large herbivores were around, bifaces were used both in order to process these taxa and to ensure the continuation of the special relationships between the hunter and the hunted. Once large herbivores were not longer around, new tool types were adopted in order to process and keep different relationships with other animal taxa. So as you can see, we try to understand using this concept other transformations in stone tool production during the Paleolithic, and I will expand on that a little bit, because in the last year or two, we were able to test the hypothesis or follow the hypothesis, and we published a set of papers that I'll present briefly here. A few months ago, we were able to put together a paper in quaternary science reviews, which is called Levantine Overkill, 1.5 million years of hunting down the body size distribution in the Levant. We done a comprehensive search of all faunal assemblages at all Paleolithic sites in the Levant, spanning the last 1.5 million years, and we're able to show that there is a constant reduction in the average size of prey animals in archaeological sites in the Levant throughout the 1.5 million years of human occupation in the Levant. We showed that, for example, the average weight of animals at Lower Paleolithic sites in the Levant was around 3 tons, and the average weight of animals at Epipaleolithic sites in the Levant was 45 kilo. So there was a reduction from 3 tons to 45 kilo, which is hard to imagine. We also showed that the role of large herbivores was central at the earlier periods, and it was replaced by small animals throughout time. So at the end of the Paleolithic of the Levant, there were hardly any medium herbivores, and early humans hunted mostly small animal taxa. This goes well with general trends in the world in general, and this is a paper, again, 2018 was a good year for papers in this regard, and this is a paper by the group of Felicia Smith that shows that throughout the 65 million years of the Cenozoic period, there was a constant rise in the size of animals. And then around 1 million years ago, started a decline in the size of animals, which continues until this day. And they put the finger to early humans as mostly responsible for the change of this trend. And there are many other studies that demonstrate this case, but you can see clearly for yourself that unless in Africa and parts of Asia, mega herbivores are not around anymore. Last year, we were able to put together 2 papers which are of interest to this regard. In the lower paper, in the paper at the bottom, which was published in the Yearbook of Physical Anthropology, we set together a very detailed analysis of the human anthropic level, and we showed that humans were mostly carnivores, or humans are mostly carnivores. In the upper paper, we presented another hypothesis which suggests that prey size decline was a unifying ecological selecting agent in Pleistocene human evolution. We suggested that the decline in animal taxa that were available for humans were a major selecting agent, and a little bit of details, but you are welcome to read the papers, of course. We hypothesized that mega herbivores extinction throughout the Pleistocene that led to a progressive decline in large prey availability were the primary selecting agent in key evolutionary and cultural changes in human prehistory. We suggest that humans specialized in acquiring large prey because of their higher foraging efficiency, high biomass density, higher fat content, and the use of less complex tools in their acquisition. We suggest that the appearance of complex tools had to do with the reduction of size of animal prey. So the development of technology followed the reduction of animal prey and not vice versa. We argue that the need to mitigate the additional energetic cost of acquiring progressively smaller prey may have been an ecological selecting agent in fundamental adaptive mode demonstrated in the Paleolithic archaeological record, as I said before. I will finish with the last paper that I wish to present. Again, it was published last year in the journal Anthropology, and in this paper we try to follow a connection between specific animal taxa and specific stone tool types from different places on the planet, which we had evidence for. So we try to we try to show that in the animal world, animals keep their traits very much persistent while their prey is constant. And we try to combine between these two elements, and we suggested some kind of a circular trend. We suggested that there was an energetic necessity for prey rich in fat and protein and marrow, and humans were after this prey. For this reason, humans developed a designated stone tools for hunting and processing these animals. Within time, there was a development of practical and ontological cosmological relationships with this kind of prey. With time, because of human predation, this prey declined, and then human had to move to the other prey size category. And we suggest that because of the cosmological and ontological aspects, they developed a new set of tools in order to process, to hunt and process this kind of taxa. And when this taxa decline, they move to the next taxa with the next stone tool toolkit, etc., etc. And these are our thoughts regarding that at this stage. Thank you very much for your attention.
That we are able to entertain questions from people who are online, so I'm going to try to maximize it. And I see that that Mel has his hand raised, so maybe we'll go ahead and Mel, if you want to unmute and ask a question.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful presentation, Dr. Barkai. I have been following Mickey Ben Dor's work for some years, but your work, which is obviously voluminous, is to my embarrassment new to me. So I spent almost 2 years living with and studying the Kong or Junquasi, so-called Bushmen of the Kalahari. These were hunter-gatherers at the time in the 1960s and 70s that were very So let me just put my video on so I'm not too mysterious. That were very far down on that beautiful regression line, going toward smaller and smaller prey, and they, like the Hadza, the San, are only getting 20% or so of their diet by weight from meat. And my colleague Boyd Eaton and I have spent many years trying to figure out what the actual Paleolithic diet might have been like, and we certainly don't think that 20 or 30% meat is an adequate estimate of the amount of meat. So having said all that, I'm sorry to be, I'm usually not the first one to talk, but unfortunately I have a class that I have to meet at 5 o'clock. So there's a sense in which your model, which by the way, I totally agree with you about the ritual meaning of prey and the relationship with animals and that you kill, and I'll never forget the time that I was out on a hunt with the San, and they killed a tsessebe, which is a sizable antelope, and she turned out to be pregnant, and they left the fetus behind. And I said, "What is that?" Because I never saw them waste anything. And one of them said "gamasi," which just means the gods. And so that expressed that was an unforgettable moment that expressed that attitude that you described of respect. But so if I can just play devil's advocate a bit, there's a sense in which I see your model as more of a theory of Homo erectus as an adaptation than Homo sapiens. And in fact, you yourself said that the evolution of Homo sapiens involved this decline away from megafauna, despite the fact that people like the Efe and the Aka and Baka are killing elephants. They're very small people. They're killing elephants, like you showed. So that in itself is very interesting, and I was very struck several years ago by a paper from the Russian group, Vladimir Pitulko, if that's, I'm sure you know it well. So this is a 45,000-year-old mammoth hunt, a mammoth that was clearly, I think, clearly, maybe you disagree, but clearly shown to have been killed by humans, not scavenged, and not, and this is very late compared to the time you're talking about. And I gather there's some uncertainty whether these were Neanderthals or modern Homo sapiens, so-called. But I also, my understanding is that people were following this. This occurred within the Arctic Circle. This killing of the mammoths, and I understand that people were actually following the mammoths as they disappeared, going farther and farther north. But they were still able to do it with only 45,000 years ago. So that's a lot. Sorry, I threw out there, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about any of that.
Well, first, it's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm very happy that you listen to my talk, because me and my colleagues are really influenced by your work, all kind of work. I mean, mostly about the work on the reconstruction of the Paleolithic diet, but of other studies as well. I was talking about human beliefs, and I've been reading your works about why human believe and in what they believe, and I think that it all comes together. So
Thank you.
So you're touching upon many aspects, and indeed, it is not easy to push back in time these concepts into into the Paleolithic. But again, what drove me to that was, in the first case, these fascinating examples of the manufacture of replicas of stone handaxes from elephant limb bones or other mega herbivore limb bones that were practiced as at least 1 million years ago, very deep in time in the Paleolithic. And this had no practical explanations. And most of my colleagues tried to explain human behavior in the past only by following practical explanations. And this was one of the triggers that brought me to think that other consideration rather than only practical or functional aspects took place in the Paleolithic. And then when we try to realize the role of mega herbivores in early human diet, and we realize that first, mega herbivores are present almost at every site and at every layer. And the supply of fat is so incredible and important, we came with the hypothesis that humans were dependent on these mega herbivores and had to hunt them themselves. They could not rely on hunts of other taxa, and other taxa hardly hunt elephants. I mean, elephants have no predators in nature. So we work under the assumption that early humans didn't just sit under the tree and wait for an elephant to die, but they had to be active about that. It is true that there are no direct evidence like the one from the Arctic, but there are some clues that could lead to the understanding that early humans could have used wooden spears like they used 400,000 years ago at the site of Schoningen, where wooden spears were found and used for killing horses, but maybe also for killing elephants, because they found at the site of Schoningen also elephant remains 400,000 years ago. There are 2 sites in Germany which were excavated in the 30s, in which wooden hunting spears were found in association with elephant remains. So it might be the case. We wrote a paper a few years ago describing all kinds of methods of hunting elephants, and unlike many people in our Western societies that believe that hunting elephants is close to impossible, we showed that hunting elephants, when you know how to do it, is quite simple. And if you follow the papers of Jerome Lewis, as I mentioned before, who works nowadays within groups of pygmies at the Congo Basin, and describing the way they hunt elephants and dismember elephants, it is true that now they use steel spears, but they say that their ancestors were using hunting spears made of wood, and they have all kinds of tricks how to hunt elephants. Indeed, they hunt an elephant once every 6 months. It's not on a daily basis, but it lasted for many months. So if we put all this evidence together, I agree that there are still not enough archaeological evidence to support every detail. But if you would not put this hypothesis, we would not look for the details. And
I would just ask as a follow-up if there's something about the density of the wood that they used, and particularly about if elephant limb bones are more dense than other herbivore limb bones because they're so heavy, they're carrying so much weight, and that might be a practical reason to use, even if they didn't have to, it was easily available. And if these are very dense bones, then
these are dense bones, but they are made in many cases of spongy bone inside. There is a cover of very thick bone, but the inside is spongy. And there is a big debate in the literature whether elephant limb bones have a bone marrow like other bones or not. And this is still under debate, but it is clear that in many archaeological sites, earlier archaeological sites, humans were smashing open elephant limb bones, and I see no reason to do that unless in order to retrieve the marrow.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That's wonderful food. I once heard Louis Binford speculate that, and I don't think he wrote this down anywhere, but he speculated that marrow was an ideal weaning food for.
It might be the case. There are studies mostly in Mongolia that shows that horse marrow are used in order to wean children. And this might be the case, maybe even in the Lower Paleolithic, who knows? But I guess that they breastfed their offsprings to a large extent, and they shouldn't have weaned them before time. I hope so.
I have to go take care of my students. Thank you for your
so
talk,
much,
Dr. Barkai. We'll talk some more.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Very specific. It's about that Levantine overkill paper. I've never read that paper for record, but I read Reuven's comment on that paper, and they claimed that your conclusion was based on two assumptions. Like first is that hunters always hunted like the biggest prey first, and second is that their prey choice actually tracks the natural availability of animals. Do you have any responses to their comment?
Yes, you should read our response to their comments.
It's already published?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Can you just
so it's all there. It's all there. We ran different kind of analysis, and we showed that it's only strengthened our point of view. We specifically argued that humans went after the largest animals available, and this is a global phenomenon, and not only in the Levant. And we showed that there are many cases that prove the point that animal taxa representation at archaeological site do reflect animal taxa availability in the environment. But again, it is all in the paper.
For example, did you have any reference collection, like paleontological collections in the same period as a comparison to the archaeological assemblage?
No, there's none.
Okay. Yeah. So I find this fascinating. This idea of prey size decline and depletion is driving technological evolution, because there's, as you know, there's a narrative that I've also amplified myself of this biocultural feedback between increasing cultural, technological sophistication, leading to brain size increase, leading to, so autocatalytic feedback kind of thing. And I'm starting to have more reservations about this. And this is more that you're presenting an external constraint, like forcing sort of thing, that it's not just that the technology and the brain keep, amplifying each other, that you're forced into making more complicated technology. And I think that's very intriguing. And I wonder if you could say a little bit more about what it is about the declining prey size to where the response would very typically be an increase in technological complexity or sophistication.
Absolutely, not only technological sophistication, but also cognitive abilities, as you mentioned, because for example, in the case of the transition between the Lower Paleolithic Acheulean and the Acheulean in the Levant, we see the possible appearance of maybe not a new human species, but the human remains that are found post 400,000 years in the Levant are not classified as Homo erectus, but as a different kind of human species, which has both characters of Neanderthals and modern humans, Homo Sapiens. So around 400,000 years ago, a new human type emerged in the Levant. I don't think it's new. I think it's an evolution of the local Homo erectus, but it is clear that they had to change both biologically and technologically. We suggested that the shift in hunting practices, while elephants were not longer around and people had to hunt mostly fallow deers. At Kesem Cave, 85% of the faunal remains are composed of fallow deers, and this is the case at other contemporary sites in the Levant. So we made a calculation that in order to to compensate for the hunting of a single elephant, they had to hunt between 200 and 400 fellow deers. And this necessitates not only different hunting techniques, because there is a major difference if you hunt a single elephant and if you hunt 400 fellow deers which flee. Elephants do not flee. They don't have anyone to escape from, while fellow deer flee. So they needed new hunting techniques, new hunting tools, but more significantly, as I mentioned before, when you hunt an elephant, it is not important which elephant you hunt, because each elephant had huge quantities of fat. This is not the case with fallow deers. With fallow deers, if you want to make a living, you must hunt adult individuals with a lot of fat content in them. So you must be specific in recognizing and identifying which specific animals you hunt. You know, there are groups that have 50 different names for a single animal taxa depending on the fat content that they have, and there are a lot of indication to recognizing the fat content by the fur, by behavior, and so on. So they must have been more cognitively advanced in order to locate specific members within the herd in order to be hunted. And again, at Kesem Cave, most of the fallow deers that were hunted were adult individuals with high quantities of fat. So they had to be more cognitively advanced in order to be specific with the hunt. They had to be more agile, and there are evidence that modern humans are more agile than Homo erectus. And again, we that mostly to the hunting practices and following herds of fallow deers, and they had to adapt their technology in order to hunt different animal taxa and process different animal taxa. So this is only one stage of the story. We are trying to figure out the other stages in changes which in some cases combine cognitive changes and technological changes. But as you know, after the appearance of modern humans, these are mostly technological changes. For example, and some of these thoughts are in our last year paper in the journal Quaternary. For example, we suggested that the invention and adoption of the bow and arrow was following the reduction of animal size, and hunting from a distance was required, while medium-sized animals were not any longer in abundance, and humans had to go after small gazelle or small fleeing animals that they had to be hunted from a distance. So we suggested that the invention and adoption of bow and arrow was not out of cognitive ingenuity, but it was a necessity in order to hunt what was rest to be hunted, and this is a reflection of this process, at least in our wild mind. And again, I'm not deterministic in nature. I think that humans were capable of doing anything they wanted, starting the Lower Paleolithic. I think that for the first 1 million years, when elephants were around, humans could make a living out of elephant without working too hard. When animals become depleted, they used to use their smarts and their strength and change. But I don't think that this has to do with any kind of being better than earlier hominins. I think that early hominins made a lovely well-being for a very long time, because everything they needed was available for them. And once this has changed, mostly because of their own activity. And I think that this is why they were so much concerned with the well-being, because at least in my thinking, I believe that early humans knew that they are hurting nature or the cosmos, and they are causing changes in the world. And I think this is why they were so constrained. And in some sense, they were cutting the branch they were sitting on, and they were conscious about it. in my opinion. And I think this is why they made replicas of the stone handexes from bone handexes. At least in my understanding, it worked well for hundreds of thousands of years, but there is a limit to what extent the cosmos can sustain human behavior, at least in my opinion.
Thank you. Well, that seems to be pretty apparent today, anyway. But one quick follow-up, just famously the global distribution of Handaxes is uneven, and it's appreciated that there are more in Eastern Asia, for instance, than they used to be thought. However, it's clear that there is some difference. Does this map onto large herbivores or proboscideans in any way?
Absolutely, absolutely. The world was full with large herbivores. There is even a single bone handaxe made of elephant skull part in China, which is under debate, but it is there. We know very little about what happened in East Asia, but global reconstruction showed that elephant biomass was really high in all continents. You're welcome. Thank you so much.